Hello! Well, thanks for downloading us. It's another Confessions podcast from your friends at Radio 2. Whereas, you know, we have the most sinful listeners. Blimey, I mean, we do all these confessions week after week and still you keep on sinning. So here we go with a concise collection featuring a fretting foot fiasco, an ingenious impending interview instinct, a stalker's steamy shame and a talking telephone trick. Here it all comes. Gather round, here comes another drive-time confession. I should say at the beginning of this one that... I mean, I don't know what kind of warning to give you, really.
Okay.
Oh, wow, this is
all
good.
I'm saying is, you know...
Suspense.
You know the opening few minutes of Casualty?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's a bit like that.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Debbie, thank you very much indeed for your tale. Dear Father Simon and the Holy Collective, forgive me, for I have sinned. Many years ago, when my eldest daughter was 16, was enjoying the beginning of her summer holiday after a stressful bout of GCSEs, she was playing It with my youngest daughter, who at the time was 10. This, as I'm sure all parents will agree, is a good thing. After all the exam stress, this was a good way to get some exercise, plus some sisterly bonding was happening. It was a win-win situation, as we didn't say back then. As they were running around the back garden, I'm already nervous. Mm-hmm. As they were running around the back garden laughing and playing...
Oh, nothing can go wrong.
Was there a rake?
Oh, no.
So the fact that they're laughing and playing makes it even
better.
worse. I was boiling the potatoes for our cottage pie dinner that night.
Nothing
There's an
going
oven
wrong.
involved. My eldest daughter, running into the house for fear of being caught in the game of It, misjudged her speed and direction. Only concentrating on not being caught, she accidentally hit her wrist on the cabinet. Gave it quite a thud. Actually, now I think about it, it was quite a crack. A few moments later, she walked up to me and said, "Mum, I don't think this looks right."
Oh, no.
I looked across and in horror saw that a bone was protruding
Oh, don't show us pictures, will you?
from her skin.
Okay.
I thought, that really doesn't look right at all.
No,
I've
it
seen Casualty. I know what a healthy wrist looks like. That's not one.
Okay.
Having diagnosed that something was amiss, I bundled her into the car and my youngest off to her friends, and we set off for the then quite local A&E. On arriving at the entrance to the then quite local A&E, I had a momentary thought about my boiled potatoes sitting on the stove. I couldn't remember whether I'd turned them off or not. I'd been sure that I had, but once that doubt is in your mind, there's nothing you can do about it. So in a panic, I abandoned my daughter outside A&E and rushed home to save the potatoes. All the while, images of my kitchen in flames came unbidden to my brain. I ran in the house. You will doubtless be worried for me at this point, but you will then be pleased to know, Father Simon, that I had indeed remembered to turn the hob off. Breathing the biggest sigh of relief ever, I got back in the car and returned to A&E to seek out my daughter. I was directed to a ward. I'm not laughing because it's not funny. I was directed to a ward only to my surprise to find several of the medical profession around her surveying her left foot and leg. "Oh, hello," I said sarcastically. "She hurt her wrist. You can find it on the end of her arm, not her leg. Duh."
Because I'm a valley girl in the early 90s.
And then this happened, and I swear I will never forget it as long as I live. One of the doctors took me aside and described to my horror that in my haste to avoid a potato-based catastrophe, I had inadvertently run over my daughter's foot and left her outside A&E. She wasn't happy. In fact, she was howling. "I'm off to sort the potatoes out.
Bye!
You'll be fine. Just go in." I would therefore like forgiveness, Father Simon, not from my daughter, who never fails to remind me, I'm sure she does, never fails to remind me that her summer break and ability to wear high heels was messed up due to potatoes. But instead, I want to seek forgiveness from the wonderful NHS medical staff who were treating her whilst I insulted their basic anatomical knowledge. Thank you very much indeed. Lots of love, Debbie. Well, I must say that if I was your daughter, I might take every opportunity. So you know that time when the potato... Well, thanks a lot. Anyway, it was one thing and then it became something a whole lot worse. Sister Bobby.
It could have been even worse, isn't it? Because you can imagine the daughter telling the doctor and going, well, look, I was chased by my sister and then my mum ran over me. It doesn't look good at home, does it, really? Just momentarily from another
But nobody
perspective.
did it. No, she was, I suppose, in the reversal. That's not...
Well, all the chaos. Oh, yes, she got it to the safe place. I have to say, it's a lovely, wonderful, funny tale after the effect. And if it didn't happen to it didn't happen to you, which is lovely. It happened to your daughter. You took care of her. I'm sorry, I'm still laughing. I still think it's still one of my favourites ever. Of course, you're forgiven this time. If your daughter forgives you, I think we can forgive you. You didn't mean to, and you did have the perspective, the possible of the house on fire. Sorry, I'm tripping. I'm laughing too much. Sorry, save me.
Well, I think, but the thing, you still got to reverse carefully. Even though you think your kitchen might be better, you still got to look in the mirror.
So true.
Yes, but that's the thing is, you don't, do you? Be careful around reversing vehicles, because it's also maybe just her daughter's fault a little bit.
Yeah, there's a good one.
Oh, it's your daughter's fault.
Daughter's fault. Yeah, I like that. I'm pretty sure there is a German word for the feeling you get when you think you've left something on the hob and you've left the house. But is there a German word for I'm going to reverse over my daughter's foot and leave her outside A&E
Probably.
on the off chance? Yes, I think there probably is. So on the basis of that, I am going to forgive, because I'm sure this kind of thing happens all the time.
No, it doesn't.
I'm sure that A&E, people who work at A&E will be going on and on about, oh, do you remember that time when somebody came in because they've been reversed over,
right,
even though they were here with a broken arm? Happens all the time. Definitely forgiven.
This one, let me see. It comes from Jeremy.
Is there a warning from Jeremy?
Well, never mind, Jeremy. It's a question whether there's a warning from the producer. No, there's no warning on this one. How about that? Father Simon of the Collective, I'm writing this confession as I lie awake in bed, excited at the prospect of attending work for the last time ever. I am taking very early retirement from my job as HR director of a private healthcare organisation and jetting off to sunnier climes where I can relax and adopt a much slower pace of life. But before I go, I feel the need to confess all and throw myself at the feet of the collective and beg forgiveness for my sins. I like just intrigued immediately by that setup, because clearly he's had a good life. He's about to retire. Everything's going to be fine. But there's just this one nagging thing I've never got around to telling anybody, so I'm going to tell everybody. It's the early 90s, and I was a hard-working HR officer working for an electrical retailer with a large chain of out-of-town retail stores. I was ready for a change and had applied for a job at one of our large airports. The application process involved completing a range of psychometric tests. You know the sort of thing, verbal and numerical reasoning. That kind of thing. It so happened that the company I worked for used this type of test too, from time to time, to help with recruitment. So I decided to borrow some of these tests overnight so I could practice in advance of my interview. I completed the tests at home and then checked my performance, which was decidedly average, against the scoring tables provided. I also reviewed the questions I had answered incorrectly so I could see where I had gone wrong. Well, the next day was the assessment day, and I, with about 12 other candidates, herded into a room where a bespectacled official explained the test process to all of the candidates. It was a timed test, and they were designed that you were unlikely to complete the test in the allotted time. The nervousness in the room heightened as she came round the group with test booklets. She placed the book on my table. You're probably ahead of me. I had to suppress a squeal of delight. And I raised my eyes to the heavens in thanks as she placed on my desk the exact test that I had practiced the previous evening. Now, obviously, there's an honesty thing here. I've seen this one. No. The tests were about 30 minutes in duration and, as I said earlier, not designed that they be completed in that time. But given that I could remember a lot of the answers from the previous night, I was able to work my way through the questions with gusto. Question number 1. You are a bug sitting in the corner of a room. I know that one. A, H, B to D, E. Question 2. A city contains 100,000 married couples. I know that. 50%. Question number 3. You are given a set of scales and a hamster. I know the answer to that. Disraeli. Thank you. So, I loudly complete this test by putting my pencil down with a flourish and sit back, looking very, very satisfied with a smug expression on my face. After only 20 minutes, I had completed the lot. Simon, the look of horror and distress on the faces of some of my co-applicants was a sight to behold as they sweated and struggled with the mathematical problems. When our eyes met, I'd give them a mildly encouraging glance, but add a hint of, "You must be a bit thick not to have finished by now. Look at me, I've already done it." Well, the test came to an end, and given my genius level scores, it's no surprise that I was offered the job. Father Simon, I need forgiveness. Not from the recruiting organisation who were duped into thinking that I was the best candidate for the job, or indeed my co-applicants, because I did not accept the job in the end. Because I'm sure that went to the best candidate, got the job eventually once I'd turned it down from my position of strength. Nor do I beg forgiveness from the test developer, who probably invested thousands into developing a robust instrument that could effectively differentiate between a number of candidates, unless one had prior knowledge because they'd seen it. No, I figure they made enough money anyway. No, I beg forgiveness from my employer at the time, who, when they were informed of my success at the interview, agreed to match the salary that I had been offered if I would stay. And I have to say, I inflated the salary that I had actually been offered by £2,000. So I ended up with a very hefty pay increase as well. Following this incident, I promise that I have worked hard and been honest, mostly. As I retire gracefully from the world of work, I implore the collective for their absolution. My scene, super smart work. I mean, he did a lot of prep. He did. If you're going to do an interview, you don't go in cold, so he did. It wasn't his fault, I think. But then he's offered his job with increased money, and he says, "Oh yes, I got a little pay rise. Can you match it?" They said yes. What do you think, Sister Bobby?
Well, there's two things here. First of all, he went and prepared for a test and got the same test paper. So that was a lot of luck. But it also showed a lot of resourcefulness.
Yes.
And, of course, adapt to succeed and all that. So that made perfect sense, actually, to prepare yourself. Even if you didn't get the same test, you're likely to do better. So it made sense. And you just got lucky by getting exactly the same test. Who wouldn't do that? That makes sense. The thing is, you were going after another job. So the very fact that you didn't take that job, so your cheating didn't benefit you there. Are you still with me? Right, and you stayed with the other job. Is actually, it wasn't a product of forethought that you got the increase.
Well, they matched the salary increase.
But it wasn't. He didn't go out to get that. He wasn't Machiavellian about anything. He didn't go, "I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go this long-winded way around." The other thing is, he can be forgiven.
There's a third thing. You said there were two things.
Sorry,
This is already your third
See,
point.
the thing is this is the thing about getting forgiven. Was the company that gave him the increase, his company he was with, were they valuing him? If he can answer...
you're overthinking this. I don't know.
Did you want a concise answer?
Yes.
Yeah, he's forgiven.
He's forgiven. Very good. Okay, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah.
What do you think there, Brother Matthew?
Well, what's wrong with revising? That's all he was doing, is revising, and it just so happens he gets very lucky with the questions. Who is this recruitment company that's just giving the same test out time after time? Not a very good recruitment company, I would suggest. Also, this idea of getting, inflating your wage by about £2,000, no harm, no foul, happens all the time. It's a bit like being a bit creative on your CV. We all do it. No one says you should do it. Obviously, we don't condone you doing it, but everyone does it. So I'm going to definitely forgive because, it's the real world, kids.
Thank you very much indeed for the confessions. There are thousands coming in, and Peter has sent in today's. Peter, thank you very much indeed for tonight's confession, which has sneaked in through here. So, let me see. Is there a warning with this? Is there a certification? Is it a PG? Slightly PG, not only.
Well,
just.
use of the word sauna means.
I see. Yeah, I do. I saw her standing there.
Yeah.
Oh, blessed bunch, please consider my confession from an incident just last week. So this is fresh. Fresh this is. My wife and I were fortunate enough to be able to spend the week skiing in Austria. This was our second visit to this particular hotel that we stayed in. And one of the reasons for choosing to go there again were the excellent relaxation facilities, which included a swimming pool, along with a Finnish, capital F, that is, and infrared sauna and steam room. Oh, what?
What's an infrared
I was going to say, don't know the difference. Go on.
Well, the Finns are obsessive about this one. Every house has got a sauna. I think there's one sauna per household in Finland. Mm-hmm. And I think going back a long, long time, like the sauna was like the most important room, and you would cook in the stove, and children and mothers gave birth in the sauna. It was like a very important room. It's like a trad sauna. When you think of a sauna, that's a Finnish sauna. Infrared sauna, no idea.
Okay.
Oh.
It's got infrared heaters with infrared light. Makes you feel warm. I'm not sure the dermatologist would approve,
Okay.
but hey,
Okay.
you know.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, so in Austria, they had a choice.
Brilliant.
You go in the Finnish one,
Uh-huh.
trad. You
Yeah.
go in the infrared, sort of cooler and redder, I imagine. Anyway, back to the story. Who's this from again? I can't remember.
Peter.
Oh, St. Peter, that's right, yeah. I particularly enjoy the Finnish sauna, Father Simon, but my wife finds it a little too fierce, and she chooses the infrared. There you go, more information. Infrared milder.
We're learning all about saunas tonight.
Yeah,
This is
thanks.
great.
After our first day of skiing, we went to rest our weary bones. I should add here that we are now what might be described as more mature skiers, and the thought of a warming sauna tends to appeal more than the other forms of après-ski, which largely seem to entail young people drinking copious amounts of alcohol, and we would rather not do that kind of thing, says Peter. Alas, the Finnish sauna hadn't been turned on, so I had to use the steam room, which he hadn't told us about up until this point. I probably overextended my steam soaking, and I felt quite weary as I emerged some 35 minutes later. For the last few minutes in the steam room, I'd been chatting to a couple of other Brits, one of whom shared the same profession as my wife. On emerging, as I blinked the steam from my eyes, but to be honest, still suffering from sweat-induced blurred vision, I looked across the room to see that my wife was standing, naked, and chatting to some of the other male guests. I know. It's about to turn into a farce, by the way.
Okay.
Brian Ricks isn't in it, but he could be. That's an old reference for older people. I was a little surprised to see my wife naked, but accepted that my wife was simply getting into the spirit of things in this part of Europe, where naked mixed saunas is quite the done thing.
Yes, very much
we never did this kind of thing in Margate. But I was very happy to learn the local customs.
Yeah. Well.
I walked over to her, took my swimming shorts off,
Oh, goodness me.
and as I walked,
no.
started to tell her about my conversation in the steam room.
Oh, no, I know what's going on.
You'll never guess what, my dear. There's a woman in there, says she's a librarian too. I'm explaining. Anyway, she turns round, German accent required now, Simon, and says, Auf Deutsche bitte? In German, please. Yes, all too quickly I grasped the enormity of the situation. I had mistaken another naked lady for my wife. Really? Well, it was steamy, Father Simon, and my eyes were watering, but this was still pretty bad. What could possibly make it worse? Well, at that precise moment, my wife walked in on my spluttering excuses as I was trying to make my apologies in a rather very British way. Very fortunately,
Naked.
my wife has conferred her forgiveness on me, agreeing that the woman's hairstyle and indeed body shape of the German lady were remarkably similar to her own. But I do seek forgiveness from the naked German lady for my rather bold approach towards her and telling her about the librarian from England. And I apologise for removing my shorts with uncharacteristic abandon. I trust that you will understand how easily confused a chap can become. Thank you, Peter. Well, I mean, thank you very much for that. We've had similar stories. But at the bottom of this, if you
Yes.
pardon the expression, is that he confused one naked woman for his wife. And I'm not sure I go along with that. Anyway, Sister Bobby from the
Well,
Priory.
yeah, I was going to say that, but his wife actually did concede that actually
Yes.
there were similarities between them. But you'd think that their closeness would have meant there were a couple of other maybe distinguishing marks that he would have worked out that
Okay.
she wasn't her. I don't know. It was steamy. It was fine. The thing is no one was really upset. But it was amazing how actually you were waiting for your wife's permission to take your trunks off, towel down. I don't know what you had. Because as soon as you saw your wife naked, you went, oh, yeah, okay, let's do this. So it seems that I think you were, I don't know, there was something you were. Anyway,
Keep going.
moving on. You're forgiven.
All right.
Get your spade, somebody. I started down there.
Okay, so
Yes,
Matthew, what do you think?
I mean, obviously, it's the done thing when
is.
with our continental cousins and going into the sauna, you have to absolutely take everything off, or everyone's grossly offended if you don't. So obviously, Peter has done what one should always do, which is when in Rome, take your trunks off when talking to your wife in the sauna, and it was steamy. And who'd have thought? I mean, they
You're
look
not
the same.
going to confuse.
You know, yeah, well, you know,
It's not going to happen.
It was maybe maybe she had her back to him, and
So
maybe and maybe that other things were good. None of that. We're all speculating. So I am going to forgive, because which of us wouldn't have done the same?
You are all over the place.
I am a bit.
Dear Father Simon and the Holy Collective, I come pleading on my knees for forgiveness for an innocent prank that lasted an entire summer holiday. I would like to blame the following confession on teenage hormones flying all over the place, but I place myself in your hands. It's the late 90s, and it's my summer holidays. I was in my mid-teens, and I lived with my younger sister and mother on the Isle of Wight. One day, I asked if I could have a telephone installed in my bedroom. Mobile phones were still an item of luxury for business-type people, not teenagers. Every self-respecting teenager owned a BT call card, and because we didn't have cheese for brains, had to remember all our friends' telephone numbers, because these were different times. Get that, kids? Actually remembering a whole bunch of different numbers.
Remember that, yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. My mother agreed amazingly that I could have a phone, and we just so happened to have a spare one which hadn't been unpacked after moving to the island the previous year. I took it out of the dusty box under the stairs and mounted it on my bedroom wall. Imagine my excitement. We didn't have this thing called the internet just yet, but I had a line to the outside world from my bedroom. I felt like one of those kids in the American films in which every teenager seemed to have their very own telephone line. He could plug a computer in and nearly cause World War III. I saw that film. Very good it was too. War Games, I think. Now, whenever I wanted to speak to my friends, I didn't have to perch on the stairs where my pesky younger sister could overhear everything I said. The novelty of life on the Isle of Wight soon wears thin for a teenager. So one day I started dialing random numbers, which obviously I now realise is something that I shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
Much to my surprise, I discovered that if I dialed 1234, like at the start of a Ramones song, I would be connected to the speaking clock. At the third tone, the time sponsored by Accurist will be 5:34, and so on, and then 3 beeps. That's the way it went. I thought that was interesting, but nothing really to relieve my boredom. I replaced the handset and studied the phone. I noticed that there were 2 buttons. One was redial, whose function was pretty self-explanatory. But then there was another one which said recall. Oh, what does this button do? I pressed it, but nothing happened. Feeling the sting of boredom return, I dialed the speaking clock again just to check what the time was. The time, sponsored by Accurist, is 5:40. I mean, pretty much it was just a few seconds on from when I dialed last time. But anyway, the recall button caught my attention again, so I pressed it. To my surprise, the line went dead. Strange, I thought, but fully informed of the time, I replaced the handset. And then I discovered what the mysterious recall button actually did. It made the call you dialed call you back.
Oh.
And the phone started to ring.
Oh.
My mother picked it up. Hello? Hello? What? Now, I must explain that my mother never was and still isn't very tech-savvy and usually relies on me to explain technological anomalies. She hung up and called up the stairs asking me, "Why is the speaking clock calling me?" I don't know why I didn't tell her it was me, but in a panic I said, "The speaking clock called you? Don't be silly." My mum muttered to herself that it must be a fault and carried on. While Father Simon and I couldn't resist, I dialed 1234 again. And when I heard the voice of the man telling me the time, I pressed the recall button and hung up. Sure thing, the phone starts to ring again downstairs. I left it for my mum to answer. I stuck my head out of the door just to listen to my mum's dismay at the speaking clock apparently calling her again. Oh, what was it, Mum? Who was it? It's the speaking clock again. Maybe it's going to ask you out. Maybe it fancies you. Quietly amused, I carried on with my day. I wish I could say I left it there. Over the course of the summer holiday, I did the same trick over and over and over, bemused at watching my mum get more and more puzzled by the strange calls. She was so confused that she resorted to calling BT, and I will never forget the conversation, which went something like this. "Yes, hello, it's Mrs. Morris. This is going to sound very odd, but the speaking clock is calling me." "Yes, I know, but it actually really is. At least twice a day." "Yes, I know, they're nuisance calls. I want you to stop it." Whilst BT went on to test the line, but to no avail, I was beside myself with silent laughter. It honestly didn't occur to me that I was doing anything silly or naughty. I thought I was being hilarious. as you do when you're a teenager. My mum was a very hard-working single parent raising 2 teenagers, and it must have been a very stressful summer holiday receiving random and unsolicited telephone calls from the speaking clock, even though it could have been quite useful knowing what the time was. It wasn't until my mum started talking about seeing a doctor because she thought she was actually going mad that I stopped the prank. I swear to you, she'd tell everybody the talking clock is calling me. And you know what? I know what the time is. I've got a watch. Years on now, my mother still laughs about the calling speaking clock incident. And although I laugh along too, I still have terrible pangs of guilt. He hasn't confessed.
No, he hasn't.
Father Simon, it is for this hiccup in what was an otherwise perfectly angelic set of teenage years that I throw myself on the mercy and seek forgiveness from your collective. I need to tell my mum. I need to tell her it wasn't MI5, it wasn't the local council, it was me. Says Matt. Tonight's confession then, it's the speaking clock, and who knew if your speaking clock plus recall button equals confused mother. Funny for a bit. Let's see what Bobby from the Priory makes of that.
You have got it right. Funny for a bit, but you just went on through the whole summer. Also, it would have cost your mum money.
Yes.
So that wasn't fair. I'm actually really intrigued to say it actually rung you back. I didn't realise it would. That's great. And it's great that customer services were there on the other end to help you out. There's a go. Different times, eh?
Who'd have thought that? Yeah, that would freak you out, though, if the speaking clock wants to talk to you.
It's very scary. Having said that, Matt, you're not forgiven. That was too mean for too long.
Let's see what the novice makes of it all.
Can you remember, was it a man or was it a woman who was
I
on?
think it varied.
Yeah, there you go, because yes, I think you said a man. I just couldn't remember, but absolutely. I thought it was fine. It went on for a long summer, it amused him, but Isle of Wight, you're obviously very free with your money, because Northern Boy here, that would have cost mum without that. When you ring the speaking clock, it does cost you some brass. So, well, I'm pretty certain, certainly in the late 90s. So, on that note alone, the fact that his mum's had to shell out for his hooliganism, I think, no, Matt, on this occasion, you're not forgiven.
And dial-a-disc, that cost quite a lot of money, didn't it?
Oh, yes.
And you could call the test match, find out what's going on there. Imagine
It's
that.
all different time.
Absolutely.
Club
Brother
call.
Matthew.
Wouldn't it be great if when you dialed 1, 2, 3, 4, you didn't get the speaking clock, but you did get the Ramones? I wouldn't have been off the phone. That would have been superb. I think this is one of those pranks that the longer it goes on, the better it gets and the funnier it gets, and worth every penny. Obviously, it was on the phone bill, but yes, definitely worth every penny. Well done. Definitely forgiven.
They were this week's confessions. Pretty good selection this week. Hope you enjoyed those. Who did you forgive? If you have a shadowy secret inspired by one of those stories, if there's something you want to tell us, do it here. confessions@bbc.co.uk. More in a week, and don't forget all the highlights of the show on the iPlayer. You can listen again and you can download the shows. On Monday, Mark Radcliffe was talking about the Folk Awards. Chris Isaac was in as our special guest talking about his new album. Tuesday, we did a Tunes Day, and top driving instructor Tim Shawcross was talking about how to reverse cars without running over your children's feet. See the confession from Monday. Rod Stewart was on fine form on Wednesday, and Nige on Thursday with his Kid Cassoulet recipe. All the details on our Radio 2 website pages. Thank you very much indeed for listening. We'll do it again next week.